What up, Giants fans? In today's show, we're going to go through some trade destinations for Kenny Golladay because the rumors are heating up. Ian Rappaport talked about it, so we're going to talk about it on today's show. Should the Giants trade Kenny Golladay, or should they keep him? I want to hear from you all. Type T for trade, type K for keep. Welcome into New York Giants Now by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Marshall Green. Kenny Golladay trade destinations are the focus of today's show. He has not lived up to the hype after signing that 4-year, $70+ million contract back in 2021 NFL free agency. It hasn't worked out. He complained about not playing a lot in week 2, got his chance on primetime, Monday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys, an NFC showdown. And he didn't show up. He flopped. Dropped 2 passes, dropped a big 4th down to close out the first half, dropped a huge 3rd down late in the game. Doesn't have a good attitude. I don't think he's a guy I want on this football team. And I think Joe Schoen needs to set a precedent that you have to earn the right to play for the New York Giants. He's a new GM. He's talked about culture. How about you set the culture? Move on from him because he has not earned the right to be a New York Giant. Here's what the cap would look like. And we have some quotes from Rappaport that we'll go to that break it down a little bit better. But if the Giants are able to trade Kenny Golladay this year, they save about $13 million. The thing is, if the Giants were to trade Kenny Golladay, I believe they would have to eat all of the money this year. But if you do trade him and eat that $13 million, you save $11.2 million next year compared to roughly about $6.7 million if you cut him after this year. So it's more of a cap-friendly deal if the Giants are able to trade him. So let's break it down, and let's actually hear from Ian Rappaport on what he said the financials would be if the Giants look to move on from Kenny Golladay. He said, Golladay had $10 million of his $17.75 million in 2022 salary fully guaranteed at signing, but an additional $4.5 million of it became fully guaranteed on the first day of the 2022 league year, which meant the Giants didn't have an opportunity to release him prior to $14.5 million being fully guaranteed. The timing of the additional $4.5 million guaranteed is extremely rare. Typically, team structure guarantees to become fully guaranteed on the 3rd or 5th day of the league year, so the team has an opportunity to release an underperforming player prior to the guarantees kicking in. In Galladay's case, not only did that $4.5 million guaranteed kick in on the first day of the league year, but an additional $3 million of the 2022 salary and $4.5 million of 2023 salary became fully guaranteed on the 3rd day of the 2022 league year. The Giants may have to look to move on from Golladay with only $10 million guaranteed, but they didn't have that opportunity as it became $14.5 million fully guaranteed beforehand, so they kept him. What's next? The Giants will be on the hook for $40 million unless they can find a trade partner. If they do one, that new team would take on whatever salary is left this year and $4.5 million guaranteed next year. I want everyone right now to type thanks Dave Gettleman in the comments section. Let's thank our guy Dave Gettleman for issuing one of the worst contracts ever to Kenny Golladay in free agency. Let's all type thanks Dave Gettleman in the comments right now. Let's get to my 4 trade destinations for for Kenny Golladay. And at the top of the list, I have the Chicago Bears. Why? Because they have a young quarterback. They need to surround him with some weapons. I know Kenny Golladay hasn't been a weapon for the Giants, but sometimes the receiver needs a change of scenery. And right now, the Bears, they could use anything at wide receiver. Because these are if you thought the Giants wide receivers sucked, the Bears wide receivers are worse. These are their top 3 receiving leaders so far through the season. Equanimeous St. Brown, 4 receptions for 77 yards and a touchdown. He's solid. Dante Pettis, the Giants cut him. That's how bad he is. He has a reception, 1 catch for 51 yards and a touchdown. And they have Darnell Mooney, who was supposed to be the next guy to get paid $20 million. Thing is, he's not that guy. He's not. 4 grabs for 27 yards. The Bears wide receiver core, it just ain't it. It might be worse than the New York Football Giants. And sometimes a young quarterback could use a big target like Kenny Golladay. You got to give Justin Fields some weapons. If you want to win in the NFL with a young quarterback, you got to give him weapons. Giants, they haven't done that with Daniel Jones, and that's why they haven't been winning many football games. Maybe he could be better for the Bears. Maybe he could help out a struggling quarterback like Justin Fields. I don't know. I think it makes some sense for the Bears because they're not very good at receiver, and they have some salary cap space coming up at the end of this season, so they could take on that big cap hit coming up. Maybe it's a trade and a restructure, something along those lines. I'll ask you guys this question, though, because like Ian Rappaport said, the Giants are going to be on the hook for $40 million guaranteed unless they trade Kenny Golladay. So would you include a draft pick to trade Kenny Golladay? Like, let's say a 5th-round pick in Kenny Golladay for a 6th-round pick. Would you make that type of trade? Type Y for yes, or you can go down and type N for no. What about the Green Bay Packers as a potential Kenny Golladay trade destination? Aaron Rodgers, we all know he doesn't like working with young receivers. And right now, that's what the Green Bay Packers have. They have a bunch of young wide receivers. Romeo Doubs, young. Allen Lazard, young. Christian Watson, young. They got a vet in Randall Cobb, but Randall Cobb is past his prime. Romeo Doubs had a good game this past week on the season. He has 14 grabs for $137 and a touchdown. Randall Cobb has 7 grabs for 108 yards. Allen Lazard has 2 touchdowns, 6 grabs, 58 yards. And Christian Watson had that big drop in week 1, dropped an 80-yard touchdown wide open, and now he has 5 grabs for 43 yards. Look, the Packers are in win-now mode. When you have a quarterback that old, in his prime, he's trying to win championships. And so is that roster, and so is that team. Could Kenny Golladay be a person that goes and fits with Aaron Rodgers? I think he could. Look, it sucked to see him go to a team like the Packers and a good quarterback turns him into that same wide receiver. I honestly don't know if he's got that much juice left in the tank, but the Packers are in win-now mode. They need a wide receiver. I think it makes sense for the Packers to take a look at a trade for Kenny Golladay. Look, if Kenny Golladay gets traded, we're going to be turning up. We're going to have a party here on New York Giants Now. I'll tell you that much. We'll go live, no doubt about it, if Kenny Golladay gets traded. So subscribe and make sure your notifications are turned on. Hit that bell icon right underneath the video and select all for your notifications so you get notified every single time we put out a video. I never want you guys to miss a video. So hit that big red button, turn on your notifications, and lock us in for the rest of the season. Another trade destination for Kenny Golladay. What about the Indianapolis Colts? Just like the Packers, just like the Bears, their wide receiving core, it sucks. Michael Pittman is a solid wide receiver. I don't think he's a wide receiver 1 just yet. I think he has the potential to be a wide receiver 1 coming up, but he has 17 catches for 193 yards and a touchdown. Those are good numbers, no doubt about it. Ashton Dulin, 9 receptions for 132 yards. Alec Pierce, the rookie, has 3 grabs for 61 yards. And Michael Strahan, not Strahan, Michael Strahan, I believe is his name, has 3 grabs for 59 yards. The Colts are trying to win now. You make a trade for Matt Ryan. You do everything they did on the offensive line. You add some players in the secondary like Stephon Gilmore. The Colts are trying to win now. And could a piece like Kenny Golladay put him over the top? You got to have a number 1 wide receiver in this league. I don't know if Galladay's a number 1 wide receiver. He was at one point, but could he be that big-bodied receiver on the opposite side of Michael Pittman for Matt Ryan to just let it loose and let it fly and throw it to a big body? I think the Colts are an ideal landing spot for a guy like Kenny Golladay. The Giants are rocking these jerseys this Sunday. You cannot lose in these jerseys. These are so freaking swaggy. We got Saquon. We got Daniel Jones. We got Kadarius Toney. We got Xavier McKinney. If I had to buy any of those jerseys, I already got a Saquon Barkley one. I would buy an Xavier McKinney one. I love Xavier McKinney. Get your jersey, though, today. Chatsports.com/Giants Throwback. That's chatsports.com/Giants Throwback. Put that in your browser. It'll put you right on the page where you need to buy these jerseys. You go to any other link, you're not going to get the deal. You got to go to chatsports.com/Giants Throwback. I'll put that link in the comments and description of today's show. The 4th and final Kenny Golladay destination that we cooked up on today's show. What about the Cleveland Browns? Look, these are probably the bottom 4 wide receiver cores in the NFL. And the Giants are probably right there with all these teams. The Browns, though, they have a number 1 wide receiver. And his name's Amari Cooper, and he's been damn good so far through 3 weeks. 19 grabs for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. But after that, they don't have a single wide receiver that's topped more than 100 yards. And then after Donovan Peoples-Jones, they don't have another wide receiver that has more than 20 yards on the season. So they could use another receiver. Help out a guy like Jacoby Brissett, who's still trying to find his footing with the Browns. He's looked pretty good so far. But maybe when Deshaun Watson comes back, they want to get another wide receiver. And the Browns, they have the cap space to absorb Kenny Golladay in a trade. The Browns have $37 million in salary cap space right now. So it would be an easy transition for them to absorb that type of money. I think it makes sense for all of the teams we mentioned. But I think the Browns could be a sneaky team to go and trade for Golladay. Big body receiver. Like we've talked about Golladay. We know who he is at this point. But I think all these teams could use another wide receiver. I'll leave it up to you, though. What's the most likely Kenny Golladay trade destination? If you had to pick any of these teams, which one do you think Golladay would be most likely traded to? Type CLE for the Browns, type IND for the Colts, type CHI for the Bears, or type GB for the Green Bay Packers. If I had to say, I'd go with the Browns, then I would go with the Packers, then the Colts, then probably the Bears. But I want to hear from you. Let me know. Where do you think Kenny Golladay would get traded?